Close, but no cigar for a couple of key Buccaneers returning from injury. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Keys to victory and predictions are coming up in a little bit. Starting this one off by saying hi to David Harrison in the live chat. David, I love you, buddy. Hope you're having a blast in Madrid. Great to see you here on this live preview edition. But we do have to kick this off with some updates as to who will, or more importantly, won't play in this game. Unfortunately, Bucky Irving is going to be out against the Bills. He is joined by Chris Godwin, Ben Bredeson, Haason, Reddick, and Marquise Watts. There was some hope and some optimism that Bucky would return this week, which would have come in really handy against the Bills' run defense that just allowed Devon Achane to rush for nearly 200 yards. But it's just too soon for Bucky. He was ruled out by Todd Bowles. I texted with the insiders earlier on Friday morning that I was cautiously optimistic, but that I believed the Bucky would miss this week and then return next week against the Rams in that much more important matchup. We've talked about it for 3 weeks now. The Rams game is far more important than the Patriots or the Bills games were. We're going to see if the second half of that comes to fruition. But Todd Bowles spoke to the media Friday about Bucky and Chris and said, quote, "Yeah, I feel very good about them. We'll see next week. There's a process they have to go through, but they're out running around well and they are moving well. We'll go through the process to make sure they're 100% before they get out there. It's not this week, but we'll see how it goes next week," end quote. I'll dive more into the run game in a little bit, but I think the Bucs can still generate enough production in that aspect of the game against this Bills defense and still be able to do some damage there on the ground. But having Bucky out there might have really changed my outlook on this game. As for the Bills, they are going to be without tight end Dalton Kincaid and defensive tackle Phidarian Mathis. Kincaid is a huge loss for the Bills in this one, considering he is Buffalo's second leading receiver, just 9 yards behind Khalil Shakir, but he does lead the team in receiving touchdowns. That's going to put Dawson Knox in the driver's seat in this one, and he will likely get some serious opportunities against Servassier Dennis in coverage, that's always a hit or miss proposition for the Buccaneers defense. Knox only has 12 receptions this season for 155 yards and a touchdown. So losing Kincaid is really going to affect what the Bills do offensively, since they don't have that alpha wide receiver that can really draw attention away. And we know that the Bills operate and run their offense through the running back and through the tight end position. So that loss at tight end could really change the way that they have to approach the way that they attack this Buccaneers defense. This is a matchup where man on man, I think the Bucs secondary is going to have the advantage. Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum, Jacob Parrish, and then Benjamin Morrison, who is probably chomping at the bit in this one to not only make up for last week when he made some mistakes, but also because I talked about it months ago when Morrison was on, I can't remember the name of the podcast, but he was on a sports podcast where he believed that Buffalo was going to take him. And they ended up passing on him, and he said that he's had this game circled since the schedule came out. But those guys are going to get the better of Shakir and Keon Coleman, and then it appears you're going to have Joshua Palmer back in the fold there for Buffalo. But these are receivers that the Bucs match up well against. The two big X factors that can change that are, of course, Josh Allen, but then the elements. Now, I don't usually talk weather on these shows, but that is definitely going to play a factor on Sunday. There is a range of potential outcomes here. You have some forecasts calling for snow showers in the morning. You have some calling for snow in the morning, followed by rain into the early afternoon, so after kickoff, but it's going to be the 20 to 30 mile per hour winds and the low 40 high that is really going to dictate some things here. That wind is not only going to make it colder, especially if there's precipitation, but it's going to make it incredibly difficult to throw the ball. So now you're talking about sloppy playing field, precipitation, cold weather, and then massive wind gusts. Throwing the ball in this game is going to be really, really tough. And unfortunately, that's going to favor the Bills. That's their element, the cold, the snow, the rain, the wind. So when you're looking for equalizers for a weak receiving core and a good secondary, that right there is what can level the playing field. So you have to trust that your guys are going to win those one-on-one battles and make plays. And I know some of you are saying, but James, plenty of players on the Bucs played in the cold in college. Yes, of course. But it does not take long to lose that tolerance when you've been in Florida for nearly a year now. I know Ibuka had mentioned that they played plenty of cold games at Ohio State, so he was going to be fine, and that's 100% true. It gets real cold in Ohio starting around this time. You have all those Washington guys, Vita and Cade. You got Ibuka, Morrison, Baker spent a long time in Cleveland. Voss was in Pittsburgh. Yes, those guys played in the cold, but that blood thins out real quick in Florida, guys, and it could be a shock to the system once they get out there. There's a reason that the Bucs went for almost 3 decades before winning a game that was below 40 degrees at kickoff. When you aren't used to it, you don't get used to it fast enough before or during the game. So I'll get to my keys to winning here in just a minute, but I want all of you to keep this in mind. This is the first time this season, and it might be the only time this season, that the elements are truly going to play a key role in how this Buccaneers team can attack a game and how it can affect the way that they play on either side of the football. So, if Grizz is out there running the ball on 7 of the first 8 plays, and you're pulling your hair out saying, why isn't he throwing? Why isn't he throwing? Well, because the wind's blowing at 36 miles an hour straight into Baker Mayfield's face. It's going to affect the way that they are able to attack. So I don't expect a lot of deep shots in this game. I don't expect a lot of long developing routes. If they're going to throw the ball in that kind of weather, it's going to have to be quick, short passes, get the ball into the hands of your playmaker, and then let them get yards after catch. You're not going to be able to air it out unless the wind is at your back. I don't know how the stadium faces, so it could be a side-to-side wind. It could be, at the back of somebody and another team is going into it. Or I don't know if Buffalo's one of those stadiums where the wind gets in there and then it swirls around and you don't really know what's happening. So keep all of that in mind, when you're sitting down to watch this game, when you're setting your fantasy lineup, all of those things. Going to jump into the chat again real quick here. Let's see. We have Bantry. Explosive plays are nice, but I'll take 3 yards and a cloud of dust all game long. Absolutely. We got another one in the chat. I can't post you, but says if the Dolphins and Panthers can beat the Bills, no reason we can't, James. I don't fully disagree with that. It's going to boil down to a couple of key things that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But look, the Bucs could have beaten the Lions. They didn't play a good game that day. Beating the Lions, who were coming off of a loss, is a very, very difficult task. It's the same thing with the Buffalo Bills. It's really hard to beat them coming off of a loss. They do have back-to-back losses already this season, but we talked about it with Evan earlier this week. They've lost 5 home games, including the postseason, going back to 2022. This is not a team that loses at home. This is not a team that loses back-to-back very often. And the other thing that we talked about is that their backs are up against the wall. This is far more important of a game for the Bills than it is for the Bucs. If the Bills lose this game, they are going to have a nearly impossible task trying to catch the New England Patriots for first place in the AFC East after the Patriots won on Thursday night. The Bucs can lose this game. The Panthers can beat the Falcons, and the Bucs are still in first place. The Rams game is the one that matters the most. We all want to see the Bucs get a win, but this game isn't nearly as important to the Bucs as it is to the Bills, and it's really, really hard to try to manufacture that kind of approach, that kind of back against the wall must-win situation that we've seen the Bucs flourish in the last couple of years after some long losing streaks. You can't just fabricate that. That has to be something that you're truly facing for you to get up to that level, and that's what the Bills are facing in this one. All right, what the Bucs will have to do to win this game, that is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. The new Stacks feature is a game changer. For example, you can now pick more on a player like Steph Curry's points, threes, and assists all in the same lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. This is a game that's going to have to be won in the trenches. And that isn't exactly the Bucs' strong suit right now. Bredeson is out this week. No word yet as to whether or not Luke Haggard will play. He isn't ruled out, but we have nothing official to go on. So you could be looking at Dan Feeney and Mike Jordan as your starting guards again. And that is not good. At all. However, for those of you that caught the crossover with Joe Marino, you know that the Bills' interior defensive line leaves a lot to be desired. So this is probably the best chance that those two guys have at going out there and winning at the line of scrimmage, because to win this game, you have to run the ball and you have to do it a lot. Last week against the Dolphins, the Bills allowed Achane to get 174 yards on his own. And then the Dolphins as a team rushed for 197. The Bills lost to Atlanta. Bijan ran for 170, while the Falcons had 210 yards as a team. The Patriots, they're the outlier. They ran for only 71 yards as a team, but they won the turnover battle 3-1, while Drake May threw for 273 yards on 22 of 30 passing. You have to do one of two things against the Bills in order to win. Run the ball effectively and then win the turnover battle. The Bills are +2 on the season in turnover differential. Josh Allen has thrown 5 interceptions. He's lost 4 fumbles. Last year, they were the best team in the NFL with a +24. They turned the ball over just 8 times all season last year. Their defense has not been getting nearly as many takeaways as they did last year, and their offense has been giving the ball away more. Of Josh Allen's 5 interceptions this season, 4 of them came in the Bills' 3 losses. On the flip side, the Bucs had just 18 takeaways last season. They're already at 13 this year through 9 games, and they have the NFL's second best turnover differential at a +8, tied with the Jacksonville Jaguars. This has been a defense that has become much better at creating chances and then capitalizing on those chances. They created chances last year, but they didn't capitalize on them. Corners and safeties were dropping the ball. The secondary has become much more sure-handed. They're stripping the ball away in traffic. They're getting strip sacks. These are all things that can be the difference in this game. We're talking sloppy conditions, cold, wind, rain, snow. You have to win the field position battle. This isn't a game where we're going to see Illinois legend Chase McLaughlin knocking down a 55-yard field goal. You need to pooch punt from McLaughlin's typical, 50-plus yard range, and you have to pin the Bills deep. But there's also no better or easier way to flip the field against a team like Buffalo than by taking the ball away from them. So you have to find a way to create those turnovers, and that means that you cannot lose contain against James Cook or Josh Allen. You have to stay disciplined in your pass rush against Josh Allen because you're going to have to guide him back inside so that it either minimizes any potential gain or you're steering him right into trouble, and you have opportunistic Bucs defenders like Anthony Nelson, Yaya Diaby, Levante David, Vita Vea that can knock the ball out of his hand from behind. You go back to last week, I know Antoine tried to make a play against Travion Henderson with the game on the line. He was trying to do what playmakers do, but he did the opposite. He abandoned his assignment and it burned them. He was supposed to keep contained. He cut inside and left the entire side of the field open for Travion to break off a 69-yard touchdown. It happened earlier in the year with Servassier Dennis. He abandoned his zone to pursue Penix, who was rolling out to the right, and left Bijan wide open. Penix could just loft it, dump it right into a bucket, and then Bijan took off and ran for a huge gain. You cannot afford any of that in this game. You do not lose contain. Run a spy if you have to, but you've got to keep Cook and Allen between the tackles. The Bucs have been gashed by outside runs this season, most notably last week, as well as running backs in the passing game. Keep the down and distance for the Bills more difficult to keep them in passing situations, and then let those 20 to 30 mile an hour wind gusts come at your benefit. Force Josh Allen to try to push the ball into that wind, and then that's when you're going to see Jamel Dean or Antoine or Tyke undercut a route and intercept a ball. And I know some of you are going to mention, well, James, Travion Henderson had a 55-yard touchdown run right through the tackles. That one was on Anthony Nelson. He abandoned his gap. He was supposed to cut inside, and instead, Hunter Henry kind of gave him an open to the outside, which Anthony Nelson bit, and it allowed Henry to just shove him completely out of the play. So again, it's those, we talked about getting the details right earlier this week. It's those little things. These guys are out there trying to make a play, but if they don't make that play and they abandon their assignment, that's when bad things are happening. You have to make sure that you are doing your job against this Bills attack, because Josh Allen will pick up 15 or 20 yards in the blink of an eye with his legs. James Cook can house it from anywhere on the field. Keep them between the tackles. Keep your assignments and minimize the damage. Let him get 1 or 2 yards. Sure, that's fine. Don't try to force something that's not there and allow James Cook to break off a 50 or a 60-yard touchdown. Going to jump into the chat real quick. Richard says, Baker got to bake. Don't let Cook cook. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of baking in this one just because of the conditions. You got to keep this one on the ground. You got to control the clock. You got to control the down and distance. I'll talk more about Baker's potential for what he can do in this one coming up in a bit. But this isn't one where I want to see Baker dropping back and throwing the ball 35, 40 times. That is not the recipe for success in this matchup. That is actually a recipe for absolute disaster. So when he has his opportunities, let him bake, but don't try to force it or you're going to end up getting burnt. Let's see. We got Lakita. Run the ball and alternate with short pass game. Otten, all running backs involved. Yes, 100%. I love that so much. Jordan in the chat. This game means a lot more to them than us because they are chasing the Patriots and need a better record to contest. Yes, 100%. We've talked about it a couple of times. Excuse me. That this is do or die for the Buffalo Bills. This is like a playoff game for the Bills because you are talking about the difference between them staying in the race for the AFC East or having to go on the road in the first round of the playoffs potentially to, Kansas City, which has been their bugaboo. They cannot beat Kansas City in the postseason. Josh Allen absolutely owns Patrick Mahomes in the regular season. When it comes to postseason, that's not a good matchup. And you certainly don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have to go to Kansas City. So yes, this again, it's so hard to try to manufacture that kind of desperation and that kind of win or go home mentality. The Bucs haven't had to manufacture it the last couple of years because they've been in situations where they had to win or they weren't going to be able to make the playoffs. They had that epic run at the end of last season. They had a big run the year before. The Bills are facing that now before Thanksgiving because the Patriots have been just that good all year. So it's oof, man, it is do or die for the Buffalo Bills if they want to get back in contention for hosting a playoff game. But I am going to give you my predictions and talk a little bit more about what Baker Mayfield should be doing in this game. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by Game Time Guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. If you want to check out the Buccaneers at home this season, you can get tickets for the Cardinals game in 2 weeks when they induct Simeon Rice into the Ring of Honor for less than $60. But no worries, if you can't make that game, you can see any of their remaining home games for under $75. And it's not just sports. For those of you that follow me on Twitter, you know my son, my dad, and I just this past weekend went and saw Paul McCartney together, got those tickets thanks to Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Wrapping things up here on a live preview edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. It is prediction time, so start dropping your predictions in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as possible. Just a reminder on Evan's predictions, his bold was that no Bills wide receiver or tight end would get over 40 yards receiving. His predictive player of the game was Sean Tucker, and his score was 27-23 Bills. My bold for this week, Josh Allen gets sacked 4 times. It's only happened once this season, and it was against the Falcons, but Allen has gotten beaten up lately. He has been sacked 12 times in the last 4 games. He's been taken down 3 times in back-to-back weeks. He is not escaping pressure quite as easily or as effectively as he did last year during his MVP campaign. And this Bucs pass rush can get awfully creative with a lot of speed and a lot of skill getting after the quarterback. 16 sacks for the Bucs defense over the last 4 games. They are going to need to get plenty of them in this one to help win that ever important field position battle. My predicted player of the game, I feel like it should be Sean Tucker, but I don't want to double up with Evan. So I'm going with Lavonte David. If the Bucs are going to contain the run against Cook and Allen, you have got to have another vintage Lavonte performance where he is crashing the running lanes, making sure that he's getting tackles for minimal gains. He's had an up and down year. There's no doubt about it, but he has stepped up in plenty of big moments for this Buccaneers defense. He's going to have to set the tone early, not let the Bills start this game off fast. You do not want to be chasing the score the entire time. So I'm looking to Lavonte for double-digit tackles, couple of tackles for loss, maybe a sack, maybe a forced fumble. Going to need a big day from him running the middle of that defense. But then I do want to mention, even with the conditions, look for Ibuka to have a really solid game here. I mentioned it on the crossover. And again, if you haven't seen or heard it, check it out. Joe Marino does an absolutely fantastic job covering the Bills. He gave some really good insights. But something that I mentioned there was that Ibuka has dominated zone coverage this season. Over 600 yards, 5 of his 6 touchdowns have come against the zone, which is what the Bills run nearly 73% of the time. Not going to be a lot of deep shots with the wind. Ibuka is going to get open, and then he's going to use those legs to get yards after catch for chunk plays. He's got 196 yards after catch against zone coverage this season. This is where he is going to be able to do a lot of his damage. So you do those quick short passes, just get the ball out, get it into the hands of Ibuka. Tez Johnson, again, he's emerging. He does not have anywhere close to the numbers that Ibuka does. Nobody expects him to. You're going to want to get him the ball in space. Cade Otton is your sure-handed, security blanket there. But Ibuka is going to be the guy. If they're going to get the passing game going, he's the one that has to get those quick short passes and then just let him take off and make guys miss in the second and third levels. Score, I think even this beaten and battered Bucs squad matches up really well against the Bills. The improved play in the secondary, their ability to get after the quarterback, their ability to create takeaways, all of this I think is going to make life very difficult on the Bills offense. What I don't like is the style of game that this is going to end up being with the injuries that the Bucs have. I just don't know if they can get the push that they need to dominate on the ground the way they're going to need to in order to control the pace of play, have long sustained drives, and keep the Bills offense on the sideline as much as humanly possible. If this was in Buffalo in October, I would lean the Bucs. I just don't like the combination of injuries that the Bucs are dealing with, and then the weather that's going to make passing the ball really difficult for these two teams. And I'm sorry, if I have to choose between the Bills offensive line and James Cook, or the Bucs offensive line and Sean Tucker or Rachaad White, I'm going to take James Cook. If both teams are going to rely heavily on the run game, I know the Bucs run defense is far better than what the Bills run defense is, but James Cook is just, he's in a completely different tier compared to Tucker and Rachaad. I think that is going to end up being the difference. Bucs cover, Bills win. I'm going to take Buffalo 24-20. Going to get some of your predictions here. David Docher, really need good play from the linebackers. Levante and Voss are going to be key in this one. Again, I talked about maintaining, that contain, keep those guys inside the tackles, but it's going to be on the linebackers. You have to have sure tacklers there. You have to have them coming up and making plays and not being pushed out of those running lanes and creating wide open space for those guys. Chet, to be honest, I want us to win this game. I don't want the Bucs to have to hit a heater to make the playoffs and win the division. Yeah, we all want the Bucs to win this one, and it's going to silence some of the critics, right? The Bucs have been criticized, even though they beat the Seahawks, even though they beat the Niners. It's like, well, they lost to the Patriots, they lost to the Lions, they've lost to these contenders. You need to beat another playoff caliber team. Even though you've already beaten 2, you need to beat another one in order to, quiet some of that chatter down. Jimbo Shrump, we didn't do bad against them. They just beat us. Go Bucs. Love you, James. Bucs 24, Bills 17. I hope you're right. And then his bold prediction, defense scores 2 touchdowns. If the defense scores 2 touchdowns, the Bucs are winning this game. I will absolutely guarantee that. Bantry says the player of the game is Vita Vea. We've got Lakita 16-14. Illinois' finest takes care of us, meaning Chase McLaughlin, probably with a game winner. And look, if the wind is at his back, go ahead and kick that 55-yarder. But if it's going side to side, if you're going into the wind, you pooch punt that thing. You try to pin the Bills inside their own 10-yard line and then let your defense do what the defense has done really well lately, and that is get big stops and get takeaways. David also says we need more gadget plays with Tez Johnson. I agree, and I think that they're coming, but I think right now they have to rely so much on making sure that they're just moving the ball, and you don't have the weapons out there that you need to create the space and the opportunity for Tez to get those gadget plays. Right now, Tez is your wide receiver too. Like, he may not line up there all the time, in two receiver sets. That's going to be Ibuka and Shep. But make no mistake about it, Tez is your wide receiver too right now. You need Bucky and then at least one of your other top three receivers out there to be able to start to create those opportunities for Tez. They're coming. I just don't think that they have the personnel to be able to run those kinds of plays quite yet. Richard says player of the game is Tyke. Noah says Cade Otton going to put up some key blocks for the run game. Look for a lot of two tight end sets. Look for a couple of times where you even drop either Cade Otton or Payne Durham back into the backfield as almost a lead back, as a fullback. They're going to have to get creative with their blocking, especially with the interior of the line being what it is. I would look for a couple of times where Baker, if they're in the pistol formation, Baker's going to send Cade or Payne in motion, and they're going to start to come across, and they're going to snap the ball. So you already have that tight end right back there ready to help out the interior of that offensive line. They have to get creative. Hopefully Haggard is going to be back sooner than later, but even then, it doesn't fix everything. You need Ben Bredeson back. You're still very obviously missing Cody Mauch. But they did a solid job of figuring out ways to make the blocking schemes work early in the season. They're going to figure it out again in this one. But that is going to do it for this episode. Real quick note, I will not be watching this game live. My son has a tournament this weekend against some of the best teams in the state of Ohio. So there's going to be some nerves from dear old dad up in the stands. His team is number 5 in the state, but they're facing number 1, number 2, and number 7 this weekend. So my weekend is booked. I will get home right around the time that the game is ending. So I'll get caught up as fast as possible. The goal is to go live with our post-game reaction around 7 o'clock, because then we have the Bucs squad show live on YouTube at 8 o'clock. I will not be on the squad show, but I will bring you the live post-game reaction before that squad show kicks off. Make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on so you know as soon as we are going live. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs, Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs, both of those places. Again, subscribe on YouTube, notifications on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Become an insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. You want to support the show, but you don't want to be an insider, please like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. And David, I see you in the chat one more time. I love you, brother. Enjoy Madrid. Safe travels home. Appreciate you being here. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.